Hello, everyone. I am back. I am indeed a physical presence here on Twitch. I am your friendly neighborhood Prax. It is Saturday night. It is time for some very good book club, chatting about books, talking about things, catching up. Sorry that I was not up to last week. I was suffering the bane of being an asthmatic. Joy. Particularly with weather changes that have been oh so much fun, you know. As they say, don't like the weather in New England, wait 5 minutes, it'll change. And, but I am here. I am present. I am here to talk about the books that I've read over the last couple weeks, the community read-along that we've been doing of the Cotton Malone series by Steve Berry and the Red Rising series by Pierce Brown, both of which are very different but very have a lot to say. Also read a bunch of a bunch of other books in the last couple weeks. As apparently people in this sphere like to say that I have a very prolific reading rate. They're not wrong. They're not wrong. So I'm going to start with the books that are not community, that I was going to talk about last week, and then I'm going to talk about a couple other things. Then I'm going to talk about the community read along, and then we're going to talk about a couple other things that have come up that have basically been like book tangential for me, relevant to books, but not necessarily, what is the word I'm looking for? About what I've been reading. There we go. That's what it is. So we're gonna start off strong with the conclusion to the Dangerous Assassin series, which is Dangerous Empress. I really enjoyed this. I've been enjoying the whole series. This is by Elizabeth Wheatley. She's an independent author. You can find her books online at elizabethwheatley.com. And I'll, of course, when this goes up on YouTube, there will be a bunch of links in the description. But, see if I can't. That's better. But it needs to be a little bit warmer. Not a lot. There we go. This series has been very good. This is the conclusion to that series. This is book 5 in the series, in the end. And I really have enjoyed this. This last book is a little bit more romance than the rest of the series, but it's like a romance that's been building since book 1. So it's good payoff of the arranged marriage, enemies to lovers. Its definition is it's complicated of this book. I still love all of the characters in this book. I love Dangerous, I love Amira, I love Phaedrid, I love all the side characters. Vesha is a wonderful villain whose humanizing moments still get to me, but I'm still like, you're an evil, evil bitch. And you're a villain, but you're a human villain, but you're an evil, evil bitch. And I love the Istovari that are in this series, the sorceresses and their culture, and seeing more about how they develop. Overall, I think the series really stuck the landing. It ended very strong. The story ended strong. I liked where things went. I thought it had both the payoff that you're expecting for this kind of fantasy series, as well as a couple interesting little twists. I also really, 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 really enjoyed the dynamic that kind of grew between Amira and Daedrith as they kind of grew into themselves as characters, but also as romantic partners, and how they are going to be working together, and how their relationship is going to change based on their changed situations and their changed political positions. You see that, you know, how respecting each other and each other's various abilities, but also acknowledging the fact that you can't necessarily have Amira go off and murder a whole bunch of people. Not that she doesn't, but you can't have Amira go off and just murderize everybody, because she's now the, you know, Daedrith's empress and not just his assassin. So there's a lot of positive growth that occurs in this book. Also, Theodred is still best character. And I really respect the fact that Elizabeth Wheatley kept a character who is physically disabled through the entire fantasy novel, and did not hand-wave his disability, did not, series, not just the novel, but the series, did not hand-wave his disability, didn't just turn around and say, magic healed him and now he's better. Showcased that he had both his very strong skills as a mounted knight and in the joust and sword fighting, but also that he had limitations caused by his physical disability and how he dealt with those limitations. I felt that that was so good. So Time of Gifts asks, do you think there will be a fantasy series about a child with incredible powers in a rigid class-based society who tries to save an empire, asking for a Habsburg or a Communist? I can think of 3 that exist. Oh god, now I've blanked on them. I was reading through it, your comment time, and then I was like, yes, I there are books like this. I've read them, and 2 of them I really enjoyed. Daedrith doesn't overthrow the existence of the class-based society. It doesn't change, you know, the overarching societal structure of the world. Daedrith still inherits his father's position, who his father was a conquering emperor, and Daedrith ends up cursed because of it, but he ends up being emperor. Amira is a princess of one of these conquered principalities and ends up marrying the emperor. It's not like they overthrew the cultural norms. They changed the political structure in the sense that Daedrith takes over basically assumes the power and control that his mother as regent had been maintaining, but they don't change the overarching structure of the world. I just realized something. I have just realized something, and I don't know why I didn't think of it earlier. The whole series, by the way, go read this series. It's really, really good. She's an indie author. She deserves a lot of credit. You can get it in paperback. You can get it in audiobook. You can get it in, and she reads, Elizabeth Wheatley reads the audiobook, and you can get it as an ebook. But this series is for fans of The Lion in Winter. Okay? Okay? If you don't know what that movie is, The Lion in Winter is about Eleanor of Aquitaine and her children, Richard the First, John the First, and Geoffrey. But nobody talks about Geoffrey. We don't talk about Geoffrey, you know? Nobody talks about Geoffrey. More people should talk about Geoffrey. But The Lion in Winter is about the fact that Eleanor of Aquitaine and her very, very powerful political control of both Aquitaine in France and England when her husband dies, and what her husband had sent her off to live in a convent, manor house kind of thing, and then her sons bring her back when, for this particular holiday feast, and she's supposed to be there. It's much drama. Dandrith is Richard, and Vesha is Eleanor. I'm just saying, if you want to know, that's my comparison. I don't know, if anyone else who's read this book has made this comparison. Let me know in the comments if you see this in YouTube, or if you watch this otherwise. But Vesha, Eleanor of Aquitaine, Dandrith is totally Richard. In his relationship with his mother, let's put it that way. In his relationship with his mother. Not necessarily in the other political issues that come about, but very interesting other things that happen. But as a whole, for this series, I really do recommend. I think the series stuck the landing. I think the ending worked really well. I enjoyed it. This last book, while it still had a lot of plot and fantasy elements, was a little bit stronger in the romance aspect. So this is one that I could see people being like, oh, it is a romantasy novel. I don't know that I like that distinction. I think that it's just has just a little bit more romance elements in it. Not a lot, but a little bit more than, say, the first couple books. Series is very good. The books themselves are relatively short. They're about 300 pages each. A good length for a good fantasy series that I think would be enjoyable. So, final vote, yes, go read, enjoy, have fun. Okay. Next up. A book that's complicated. So, this is The Emperor's Wolves by Michelle Segara. And I knew that this was the first book in a spin-off series, right? This is the first book in the spin-off series. The main series is called, what is it called? The main series is The Chronicles of Elantra. This is The Wolves of Elantra. The main series is The Chronicles of Elantra, and they're 18 books now. And this book is, so for full disclosure, I quote-unquote DNF'd this book, but it's what I'm going to call a not quite DNF. A DNF, for those of you who don't know or don't pay attention to bookish circles, is did not finish. And the reason is, I thought, and I felt, and this book was kind of marketed as, it kind of on the back in the blurb, that this is a spin-off series that you could read independently of the main series. And I did not find that to be true. I think I enjoyed the writing. I really am intrigued about the characters. I'm kind of intrigued about the plot. But for me, the problem and why I had to stop reading this book, but I will come back to it, is there are 18 books in the other series, and events that start this book, like, what page is it on? I it's on page 18, right? Page 18 introduces a character, quote unquote, tension between a named character that will be important in this book and the skull, spoiler alert, of another character. And the fight that these two characters had that led to the character that is relevant in this book having this other character's skull on their desk. And you're like, there's too much that I don't know from this other series that I need to go read this other series before I read this book. And so while this book was obviously marketed as a standalone, like a side entry into the world, I don't know that it actually is. It didn't feel that way to me. It felt much more like an actual spin-off instead of a tangential series. And those are two different things, right? Like, if we talk about it in terms of TV that a lot of people are used to, you can have spin-off series, but a spin-off series is spun off of a series that already exists. So the existing audience for the original series takes that information that they know about the original series and the world building and the story that they've got going on, and uses that underlying information to facilitate things that don't need to be explained to the audience in the new series. Angel is a spin-off of Buffy. 911 El Paso is a spin-off of 911. Law and Order SVU is a spin-off of Law and Order, right? Like, and if you... Law and Order SVU is not the best example here, because Law and Order SVU really does become its own independent series, and you did not actually have to watch Law and Order to get that. So, sorry, but other series like that. I'm enjoying the writing, I'm enjoying the characters, I'm intrigued about this, but the assumption of world-based knowledge that exists, even in the first 100 pages, right, is enough that it's very, like, NCIS Los Angeles, NCIS Hawaii, NCIS Sydney. Like, you have to have those assumptions and world building. You were correct, Coldrake, thank you, before you kind of go into this. This book assumes that level of world building. It assumes that you've read probably a large number of the Chronicles of Elantra. And because of that, it's a real struggle when you walk, you're introduced to what will be a major character in this book about these wolves of the Emperor, the high, Imperial wolves were this group of, executioners and assassins and all of these things that serve this internal emperor, who, by the way, is a dragon, right? Like, the Emperor is a dragon. Okay. But there's a lot of assumption in those even the first 5 pages, in first 10 pages, where you're like, okay, we walked into this room with this other character who we don't know a lot about yet, but apparently is important to the Emperor and is a communication between the Emperor and the wolves as a, office of the, imperial bureaucracy. And this character is describing, The door is busted off the wall. He walks into the office, and there is a skull on the desk. And you're like, okay, there's an assumption of understanding between these events that you understand, that you have read about this fight that caused this dude to be a skull on the desk in one of these other books. So I'm going to try and find the first volume of the Chronicles of Elantra and go from there and read through the series that way until we get to a point where I can actually read this book. I think this book is very interesting. I think I will enjoy it, and I will enjoy this side series when I get to a point where I can read it. But right now, it really is... I need to read the rest of this other series first before I get here. Coldrake says, it sounds like reading Brandon Sanderson series. You really need to read them all to have all the bits and how they interweave with each other. Yeah, exactly. And there are some authors who can do independent series pretty well. Mercedes Lackey comes to mind, right? Like Mercedes Lackey's Valdemar universe is a collection of either trilogies or duologies in the same universe, but most of them don't occur within the same time. At the same time, they're within the same timeline, but they're not within the same time, and she kind of jumps around within that timeline. So she does a very good job of expressing in each individual series that this might be a new reader's jumping in point. I need to express what the world is like, how the character, what are the major historical points, what are the major, fantasy setups of this world for each new reader in this new series, and go from there. I don't think that this book should have been marketed as an introduction as a side series. And I think that's a marketing issue. I don't necessarily blame the author for that. I think that's a publisher and marketing issue. Because that's frequently what happens, right? Like, the author writes a side series and the publisher's like, oh, this will be a great way to get more people to read it. We're going to market it as an independent series, even when it shouldn't necessarily be so. And in this case, I honestly think this was a marketing problem and not the author's problem. Unless it comes out that the author intended this to be a totally independent side series, in which then I'd be like, well, you kind of didn't set it up in a way that I could read it as a brand new, fresh author or reader. So we'll have to see. We'll come back to that one. Okay. So, next up, another indie author that was a reread that I was talking about doing as a reread and rereading the series is Scimitar Moon by Chris A. Jackson. And I did enjoy this as a side series, as a independent, not side series, wow. I did enjoy this as a reread. Yeah, the mosaic tile, it's stained glass, actually. Less mosaic tiles than actually stained glass. And Chris A. Jackson is another independent author. He has his serious series, and then he has his very satirical series, which are hilarious. And this is one of his more serious series. I enjoyed the reread. I can see this would not be for everyone. While the magic of a fantasy world is definitely present, it's not necessarily what we consider like a high magic world or a high fantasy series. And there is a lot of discussion of sailing in this book. And if you have no desire about shipbuilding and sailing in the very traditional sense about, building a ship with a sail and, going off to conquer the seven seas or whatever, this would not necessarily be enjoyable to you. And I can understand that. I think the characters are really, really well developed. I loved Cynthia as a character. I loved the other side characters. Even like the one-off NPCs become very interesting. Only if you get our shipwright certificate. Look, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. It's not Moby Dick levels of let's talk about whaling. It's just a lot of discussion of, and it's relevant to the plot, right? Like, it's one of those situations where it's very obvious that the author did a lot of the research and wants to use that research and have a character based on those research and take what they can take or what they can get for that. And sometimes that's really great, and sometimes you're like, there's a lot of discussion of keel shapes in this book. It's important, it's relevant, it's how Cynthia is going to take on the Pirate King and, defeat him eventually, but I could see where this is not for everyone. I think it's really enjoyable, though. Like, you read, like, the... this kind of interesting beginnings of this character, Cynthia, and you're like, Cynthia's just a sweet summer child, and then she's not. Within, like, pages, she's really not, and the world is just not good to her, but she has a skill set, and she's going to use that skill set to do what she wants. So, I did enjoy this as a reread. I mean, it's not a 3-chapter description of something. It might be like 4 or 5 pages. Hey, Crit, welcome in. So, I will say that I enjoyed the reread. I felt that the world really breathes in this book, and that Chris Jackson does a really good job of character voices, and by that I mean how each individual character expresses themselves, how they embody the text, is really great. And Cynthia is really one of those characters that you don't expect to enjoy as much as you do. Because on paper, right, like, if I just tell you that Cynthia is a shipwright who wants to build the best ship that could defeat the Pirate King, it's not like she wants to fight the Pirate King. It's not like she wants to, go on a grand adventure. She wants to build a ship that someone else will go on this grand adventure for. Spoiler alert, that doesn't, Cynthia has to do a lot more than just build the ship. But, it's like, oh, actually, that's a really great comparison. It's as if Scotty was the main character. Scotty from Star Trek, right? Like, you are focused in on the character who is an engineer, who is doing all of these things and has to focus on a lot of these issues and will be coming up with a lot of these save-of-the-day scenarios, but you will not necessarily know. So, yeah. Did enjoy not going to give any spoilers because this book is, I want people to read this, right? Like, I really, when it comes to these indie authors, I really want people to go and buy their books. I really want people to find them in the library if they can. I want people to support them and read them and give them a lot of love that they don't necessarily get from mainstream publishing, or the way in which Amazon is a chokehold on a lot of these indie authors' sales. So I like giving small little pieces. So, for example, I'll read you the introduction to the prologue, right? This is the this is the prologue of Scimitar's Moon. And the chapter prologue, Sea Sprite's Bane. Lots of ships have one, Julia, Ben Garrison argued, spearing a broiled tomato and slice of ham from the silver tray. It's not like he's doing any harm, just pranks is all. This isn't a ship, the stately woman snapped, scowling at her husband as she plucked a butter knife from the loaf of steaming bread at the center of the table. An identical knife thunked into the loaf, accompanied by a peal of impossibly high-pitched laughter. It's my home, and no place for a sea sprite to be playing tricks. He's setting a bad example for Cynthia. I think he's cute, Grammy, Cynthia chirped, giggled as a 6-inch sprite in loose pants and a tiny seaman's shirt fluttered from hiding and circled her head once before snatching up her butter knife and vanishing behind the china cabinet. Mouse don't mean no harm. He's just a sprite. Doesn't mean any harm, Cynthia, the matron of the house corrected. Honestly, I don't know where you pick up such poor grammar. Probably for me, Mother, Orrin Flaxel said, entering the breakfast room with his usual aplomb, which was none at all, and tussling his daughter's hair. She giggled and snatched a scone from the basket, bit off a corner, and grinned at him through the crumbs. She's got a seaman's manners, sure enough. Cynthia, put that down and use a knife and fork, Julia snapped, picking visibly at being called Mother by her son-in-law. I won't have you acting like a sailor at this table. I guess we're in trouble then, eh, Pop? Orrin said, taking a scone and slathering it with butter before sitting down and taking a bite. Being sailors, I mean, he added, grinning at his daughter through all his own mouthful of crumbs. Aye, we better start acting like lubbers, I guess. Ben tried to pick up his cup with a pinky sticking out, but failed and slopped black brew on the spotless white tablecloth. Another butter knife thunked into the bread. Oops. Sorry, Julia. He dabbed the stain with his napkin, smiling sheepishly. I don't know how you manage it, Daddy, Cynthia's mother said as she entered the room and gave her daughter a hug. Peggy Flaxel rounded the table and kissed her father on the forehead. You can walk from poop deck to forecastle in a full gale with a cup of black brew without spilling a drop. But on the beach, put you on the beach, and you're all thumbs. And that is page 1 of this book. And you're like, it gives you a really good breakdown of both the world that you're entering, the characters you're beginning with, the oh-so-wholesome, positive family life that we're beginning with, that, spoiler alert, is going to be utterly, totally destroyed by the plot. But it is well done, it is well written, it is entertaining. There's comedy, there's poignancy, the characters are unique and have their own voices. You can recognize each of them. Also, who doesn't love a sprite who dresses like a sailor? Like, I'm here for it. Koldrak says, I'm already feeling scurvy setting in. Look, they're on land. They have plenty of access to fruits and vegetables. So that was the last of the 3 books that I was reading that were not, shall we say, the community read-along. But last month for the community read along, we did read we read Morning Star by Pierce Brown and The Venetian Betrayal by Steve Berry. So I'm going to start with the Pierce Brown book, The Morning Star. I don't have a physical copy because I read it from the library and I had to return it. And, well, my comment about Golden Sun was that it really needed to be two books, right? Like, plot-wise, it was really two individual stories that were jammed together and should have been separate. Because there were two, like, it was just too much, but not enough at the same time. Morning Star is Darrow coming into his own, leading the rebellion, escaping from, well, I mean, he opens the book after suffering a year of torture and imprisonment at the hands of the Augustus family, and you're just like, okay, he's gonna, you know, everybody believes he's dead, he's, you know, there's been a faked public execution, but they've kept him locked up, you know, his deputies are trying to rescue him, and eventually he escapes, right? And there many people are very, very shocked that he's alive. And he kind of takes a very... Look, if you thought Darrow killed a whole lot of people in the first two books, Darrow on a revenge trip while also dismantling the government and assassinating everybody, just murder. All of the murder. There is so much murder that's going on. And at the same time, he's trying to reconnect with, like, the people that he has emotional connections to, like Servo and Mustang, and you find out all of these things. Hello, there we go, right? So you find out all of these things that are going on. You find out how the world is building and where it's coming from, and there we go. Sorry, my headphones disconnected for some reason. So Darrow goes on this revenge aspect. He joins back up with the Sons of Ares. He's going to be executes all these prisoners. He attacks Luna. He's doing all of these things where he, destroys the sun. He eventually I'm going to put the spoiler tag back up because this is a spoiler discussion. He murderizes the hell out of Octavia, who's the sovereign, and he's full-on destroying everyone he can find when it comes to both his revenge and saving his friends. It's complicated. And then he comes back in the end of this book, and he... Mustang introduces their son, the existence of their son, Prax, who'd been born while Darrow was imprisoned and being tortured. And, Darrow ends the book by promising and swearing to, build a better world for his son to live on in Mars. And also, change the entire political structure, right? He's not really, because he's basically conquered the political structure and now he is the ultimate head. But at the end of the day, you're like, this is the end of the trilogy, which was originally believed to be the trilogy. And, it really I felt that this book was a good endpoint for this character. Like, there was a conclusion for Darrow as this character. But there are a bunch more books that came after. And I know this is because originally this series was conceived as a trilogy, and then Pierce Brown just kept writing books in this world and kept writing more stories for Darrow, and you're like, okay. Koldrake asks, with the amount of murderizing in all of the volumes, does it numb you from the river of blood that flows from the protagonist's feet? Yes, and I think no. Yes, in the sense that a large number of the characters that Darrow kills are nameless NPCs that you don't have any emotional connection to, but it highlights Darrow's ruthlessness and desire to just do what he needs to get to the point where he ends up. But at the same time, there are other characters where you may not have spent a lot of time developing them as characters, but you've developed them as threats that Darrow needs to conquer. So when their deaths occur, like Octavia, right? Octavia is the sovereign of Luna, basically the supreme ruler of the galaxy, or not the galaxy, of the solar system and all of these human settlements, and the perpetuator of this very, very strong class divide between the golds and the, reds and the browns and everybody else. And I think when those moments come and you see Darrow kill people that are actually threats to him, that there is an emotional resonance there. And then when Darrow is killing a whole bunch of other people is in the, look, I am just going to wipe out half a fleet in this battle. You're like, okay, the bloodshed and the murder that's occurring isn't so much about the characters that are dying as it is Darrow's ruthlessness and willingness to kill everybody in his path, right? Like, and I think that's the distinction there. When it's necessary for you as the reader to have an emotional catharsis by knowing that the people that Darrow are killing actively in this moment are threats to him and his family and those he's chosen to protect, there's emotional catharsis. But there's also a large number of people that's just like, dude, you are in his way, and that's not a place to be. And as we are in like this massive sci-fi, and he has access to these large-scale ships that can do massive amounts of damage, he can just be like, I am wiping out this half of the fleet. And you're like, oh shit. You just killed like thousands of people, and it doesn't faze you at all because it was necessary for your actions. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, there's a lot of death here. Now, me as an individual, yeah, Koldrake says, shades of Star Wars. We cheered when the rebel fighters blew up the Imperial Starcruiser, ignoring the hundreds of dying in space that were just doing what they had to do to survive in the Empire. Or even worse, right? Because, like, if we take it to the next, that comparison to an even better, further along the line, if you follow, like, the Clone Wars, and you know about you've watched Rebels, or Clone Wars, or Bad Batch, and you're like, oh, you weren't gonna ignore the fact that a big chunk of these stormtroopers who were forced to serve the Empire are literally mind controlled and have no ability or agency to leave. Like the Reds or the Browns that are forced to serve on these vessels and have no agency because of the class structure. And they're just like, yes, the golds that Darrow are killing are bad people. Like, most of these are really, really bad people. But the peons on these ships or on the, these space stations that Darrow is just like utterly destroying, have no control or agency or ability to not be there. And his collateral damage is astronomical and he does not care. Right? Like, that's the thing. And I think that's what... There's the whole question of authorial intent, right? Like, a large people get into the question of authorial intent and what is the structure of this point of this book and why is it here and what is going on. And one of the things that comes out of that, I think we need to acknowledge, is that if we go back to the very beginning of Red Rising, which is book one of this, what was originally projected to be as a trilogy and then kind of kept going. So we're going to focus in on the original trilogy. And if you go back to the beginning of book one of Red Rising, Darrow's original function, what he originally signs up with the Sons of Ares to do, is to liberate the Reds who don't know that they're slaves to the Golds. And by the time you get to Morningstar, which is book 3, although I really think it should be book 4, but book 3, Darrow cares about the Reds, and he conceptualizes how he's different than the Golds because of his background as being a Red, but he doesn't care about anybody who's in his path to change this world state and what he has to do to change that world state. And in this case, that change of world state comes from, this whole fleet of ships gone. Darrow personally kills a bunch of very particular personal antagonists up close and personal. Sword fights, stabbing, breaking somebody's neck, and 2 people that I think he just shoots point blank in a way that's just like puts his, like, the gun underneath this thing and blows away. But how many more people does he kill? Because he has these weapons of mass destruction. Exactly, and I think Red Rising is very... Kolchak points out the authorial point of the book series is taking down a system can turn you into something as bad or worse than the system you're rebelling against, particularly if you try to do it from within, right? And there's the question of the corruption of the system. Is the system going to corrupt you, or are you going to try and tear down the system from within? And I think that we have to acknowledge that Darrow, I don't think, was corrupted by the system, because if you look at where he was when he was a Red, he was already kind of sociopathic in a certain way, in a very particular kind of way, right? Like, he cared about who he cared about, but he did not care about everybody, and he had certain beliefs and actions, even in the beginning when he's, a driller, that if you regard him and what he's doing, you end up with the knowledge that, okay, he believes and wants liberations for the Reds, but he more wants actually revenge against the Golds, right? Like, he occasionally comes back to this point of, I need to, remember EO and remember my wife. And then you've got Mustang, and you're like, you don't really remember your wife, it's okay, but you're much more focused on occasionally getting revenge for your wife, not the ideology that your wife supported. And I think we as readers aren't supposed to love Darrow. We are definitely supposed to... We're supposed to criticize him, I think. And see his flaws. And see where he is corrupted by the own system that he's going against, but he was already corrupted, right? Like, he as a Um, he as a character is not. I would not say that Darrow is a good person, right? Like, I would definitely say that he is the epitome of morally gray, because he believes in certain, like, moral good, but he also is not necessarily sure that he is the person to bring that moral good into existence. But he's the one who's there. Now, a lot of people make the comparison to this book to The Return of the Jedi, and I don't know that I agree with that. I do agree that that it sticks the landing. It satisfies as an ending for this this is a trilogy, right? Like, if we consider this as the original trilogy, and this was the original projected original end point of Darrow's character arc, it is a very good ending. I do enjoy, like, the thriller novel aspect of this book, and feeling like Darrow's trying to keep it one step ahead, but the Sovereign, Octavia, and all of these people that he's fighting against are, really kind of coming down on him, that he's coming back from being basically a year of imprisonment and torture, and he's like, I need to not just live and survive and get back to my people, but also revenge, but also overcome that desire for revenge just a little bit further and bring the promised freedom, quote unquote, to the planet of Mars that he believes he's got. Now, I think he his armada, he kind of goes the whole way. And begins technically Mustang begins transforming the governmental structure at the end of the book, and Darrow is Mustang's big fucking sword to threaten people with. I think it is a good ending to the series, and if you ended the series here, it would have been a better ending. Darrow becomes a boogeyman, Mustang becomes sovereign and begins changing the structure and trying to force changes on the caste system and how that functions, and you end up with the belief that the Reaper, aka Darrow, is both redeemed and believes he can set down his scythe. Whether that's true or not, spoiler alert, it's not, because there are what ends up being 1, 2, 3 more books in the series. But there's a time jump, so we'll end this as the trilogy here. So overall, I think Red Rising... Do I think that Red Rising is a good series? Yes. Do I think that it has flaws? Yes. But do I think I had fun reading it again? Yes, I did. I think I'm going to take a break. Now that we've read the first trilogy, I think this is a good point to take a break. We'll figure out what our next community read-along is going to be, but I don't want... There's a shit, like... I was talking with PB, right? And I was talking about specifically Hall of Smoke and Temple of No Gods by H.M. Long that we read a couple weeks ago. Hey, Separate Nation Uncentered, welcome in. We're talking about books. So I was talking about Hessa in Temple of No Gods and Hall of Smoke and Temple of No Gods, and being like, the difference between Hessa and Darrow is Darrow's ability to have weapons of mass destruction, versus Hessa has to kill everybody up close and personal, or literally, boil them alive with her brain. So that's the only difference between their kill count. And it's like, I've been between the Red Rising trilogy, the first trilogy for Red Rising, and these two books for the Hall of Smoke and Temple of No Gods, it's been a very dark period. And I kind of want to read something not quite so murder, where the main character is maybe not quite so murder happy. No. The title of the movie Coldrake is Unforgiven. Yes, and the Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven did bad things for good and bad reasons, but the myth of his life paints him as a bigger legend, which some fear and some doubt. Yeah, exactly. Unforgiven. Lots of murder. Lots of experience going on, and I think I want something just like, I don't mind dark quote-unquote fantasy. We read Justice of Kings a couple weeks ago for the last stream, and that ended up being very much a Warhammer fantasy kind of novel, very, very dark, which was fine, right? Like, in and of itself, the darkness is fine. I just want I think I'm in a point where I want to read a fantasy novel where I don't necessarily hate the main character. Not hate. Hate is the wrong word. Where the main character can be maybe a little bit more positive. Maybe just a little, like, they're not horrible people. So I think this is where I'm going to take a break. We'll figure... I've got a bunch of things I want to read on my Storygraph TBR. And so because of that, I think we're gonna talk about what we want to read for our next community read along. Instead of as we take a break from the Pierce Brown murder worlds for right now. Just in general. So, but that leads to, excuse me. That leads to the other book we read for March's read-along, which is The Venetian Betrayal, which is book 3 of the Cotton Malone series by Steve Berry. And I'm not going to lie, this is one of my favorite Steve Berry books. I like what he did with the mystery that we've got going on, how he's going to structure it, what the resolution for the mystery is, what he changes for the world state, which I thought was very interesting, by creating this kind of unified Central Asian Federation led by this woman who is trying to bring back this Central Asian ideology of Alexander the Great and how those things kind of developed. Would you say it's the best of the many Cotton Malone? I don't know that it's the best. It's one of my favorite. Like, I haven't read them all, right? So I can't say it's the best. I I like it. So if we think about Steve Barry as an author, right? And we think about like the first three books, right? Templar Legacy, Alexandria Link, Venetian Betrayal. Templar Legacy is him kind of beginning Cotton Malone and trying to figure out who Cotton Malone is and where his stories are going to be. Alexandria Link is, you know, figuring out a little bit more of the side characters that are going on. Venetian Betrayal is the first book where he's kind of figured out both Cotton and the main side characters that are going to be in this series and how he's going to hit the stride. So books 1 and 2 kind of have like some training wheel issues, and book 3 really is like where he hits his stride for the rest of the series in how the character development is going to be, who these characters are, how they're going to interact, how they're going to interact with the mystery that's going on, how he can take the history that exists and look at how that history could have affected the world. And I think that's why I really enjoy Venetian Betrayal. And I also really think that it's... I'm going to put the spoiler tag up. This is a spoiler tag for Venetian Betrayal. I love the ending of this book and how he uses the mirror of history with Alexander and Hephaestion and Cassiopeia and her complicated romantic relationship. That's not Cotton, by the way. And how great is that? Like, that's one of the things I really appreciate is, like, there's this sexual tension between Cotton and Cassie, but it's not really a romantic tension, and they acknowledge that, and then they move on. Right? Like, and then you find out why Cassie is like, I wouldn't sleep with you, Cotton. And you're like, oh, this makes sense. And then you get to the end of the book, and like the very end of the book, and what happens, and what Cassie does, just works. I think it really did work. I loved what he did with Alexander. I loved that he didn't shy away from the complexities of Alexander the Great, but also the complex relationships he had with a variety of people. And I loved that there was such a interesting look at both Venice and these various nations in Central Asia and cities in Central Asia that a lot of people don't even think about, right? Like, most people don't think, most Americans are not going to think about Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Azerbaijan, and Armenia, like any of these countries. But they have such importance to this empire that Alexander the Great built. And then, of course, to this mystery that Cotton Malone is trying to solve. And I thought it was done really, really well. And I thought, and of course, right, like, Cassie becomes such an interesting character, and that you get to see so much about her, and you get to see how Cotton interacts with her, and you get to discover that these two characters, which in a normal thriller, quote-unquote, series, would probably, it's like if this was a James Bond series, right? Like, this is book 3 in a James Bond series, and this is a girl who's been involved, if this was James Bond, and this is the girl that had been through 3 books in a James Bond series, why has Bond not slept with her? versus Cassie and Cotton are like, yeah, no, we're good. We don't need this, for a variety of reasons that are explained throughout the book. And I thought handled very well. I also thought it handled the question of what killed Alexander the Great with tact and consideration, but at the same time, you know, acknowledged it was a mystery and therefore has no real right answer. In at least the author's note. But yeah, I think it's book 3. It really polished off this that Steve Berry has found where his stride is. He knows who these characters are now. He's brushed off any problems with it. The mystery is really good, and I like the story. It's one of my favorites. But yeah, that's my opinion of the Venetian Betrayal. I would also say that it really... What year did the Venetian Betrayal come out? That's the important thing. I need to ask that question. So this book was published in 2008. And it deals with, again, spoiler tag is up. Spoiler tag. I liked how it addressed the issue of HIV/AIDS in a respectful manner. In a way that felt real and did not gloss over the issues, but did highlight how these changes and how these things can affect people in a realistic manner. So, and that's one of the reasons why I say, like, The Venetian Betrayal is really one of my favorite books in the series. And I think it really comes down to the fact that it really is that third book. You kind of polished everything off. You know who these characters are. You know where you're going. We know where the story is going to end up. And from that, we get to have a lot of fun. I also think that Steve Berry did a very good job in that author's note of addressing both the history that he was creating, addressing, but also the real world implications of things like HIV/AIDS and the impact it has on the population, particularly the people of the older generations in the early to late 2000s, with the advent of the cocktail and how the cocktail really did change so many people's lives for the better. And I think that Steve, I can't personally speak for that because it's not a disease I have, but I felt that he did a very good job, that Steve Berry did a very good job of being respectful of that disease and the impact it has on people, and the psychological and emotional impact it has on people, and how in the early 2000s, you had such, the cocktail was such a world-changing event that it was handled well, I think. And if somebody is watching this on either now on stream or later on YouTube and has other comments about that, and how it kind of would have been, I would love to hear from you. You know, leave a comment, drop in comment and see where things go. But I really do want to say that from an outsider's perspective who just suffers from their own long-term medical disease that is not HIV/AIDS and doesn't have the stigma attached to it, I felt that it handled both the long-term disability of a medical illness like that very, very well, while also addressing the stigma and the reasons why people wouldn't talk about it and the reality of the world at the time. So I felt that was very well done. So yeah, spoiler alert for Venetian Betrayal. I'm not going to get into, like, you know, major plot things. But it really did address the HIV/AIDS crisis in a way that was very respectful. But so that was Venetian Betrayal, and I think I really enjoyed that one. I did enjoy the mystery. I enjoyed how we got the flashback sequences that we got, and how Steve Barry addressed, like, the Ptolemies discussing things and in the world. I'm going to say that it really is one of my favorites of the series. I don't know that it's the best of the series, but it's one of my favorites of the series. So for next month, we're definitely going to continue with Cotton Malone, because Cotton Malone is just so much fun, and I really am enjoying reading these again. The next one on the Cotton Malone series to continue is the Charlemagne Pursuit in book 4. As a child, former Justice Department agent Cotton Malone was told his father died in a submarine disaster in the North Atlantic. But now he wants the full story and asks his ex-boss, Stephanie Nell, to secure the military files. What he learns stuns him. His father's sub was a secret nuclear vessel lost on a highly classified mission beneath the ice shelves of Antarctica. But Malone isn't the only one after the truth. Twin sisters Dorothea Lindauer and Christelle Falk are fighting for the fortune their mother has promised to whichever of them discovers what really became of their father, who died on the same submarine that Malone's father captained. The sisters know something Malone doesn't. Inspired by strange clues discovered in Charlemagne's tomb, the Nazis explored Antarctica before the Americans, as long ago as 1938. Now Malone discovers the cryptic journals penned in the language of heaven, inscrutable conundrums posed by an ancient historian, and the ill-fated voyage of his father are all tied to a revelation of immense consequence for humankind. In an effort to ensure that this explosive information never rises to the surface, Langford Ramsay, an ambitious Navy admiral, has begun a brutal game of treachery, blackmail, and assassination. As Malone embarks on a dangerous quest with the sisters, one that leads them from an ancient German cathedral to a snowy French citadel to the unforgiving ice of Antarctica, he will finally confront the shocking truth of his father's death and the distinct possibility of his own. So this is book 4 in the Cotton Malone series. It's Charlemagne Pursuit. We are going to pick up this for April. We're going to read this for the month of April. I think this will be really good. It's a nice kind of interesting. Giant Cities Beneath the Ice is not so. This is not an Atlantis or a Aquaman book. Okay, Coldrake? That's all I'm gonna say before we read it. It is not a Aquaman or a Atlantis book. There are other things going on. And the research in this book is really, really well done. Steve Berry does a lot of really interesting research with this book that is very, very surprising. But is very, very interesting. I think this is one of the most interesting twists he comes up with. But anyways, so this is what we're going to read for April. This is the Cotton Malone we're going to read for April. I think this is a good point to take the break for the evening. So we can stretch bio. I can get some more water. We can hydrate. All of those good things. And then we can come back. We can talk about a couple things that have been... We can talk about what we want to read along with this to kind of be a palate cleanser for the for the Red Rising series. And a couple other things that have come up that I'm just like, I feel a need to discuss. So, stretch, bio, refresh, all of those good things, and we'll be back in, about 8 minutes. That's how that's going to be. So we'll see you in a little bit, everybody. Bye. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Hope you are refreshed, you stretched, you bioed, did all of those good things. I got more water, which is important. Don't forget to hydrate, because you basically are a houseplant. But, I have a list, and we need to consider, first up, we need, aside from the Charlemagne Pursuit, which is the next Steve Barry Cotton Malone book, we need to decide what the second book that we should read is for the read along, the group read along, the community read along. There we go. I knew I would eventually get to the words. I was bringing up my list here on my story graph, which has become my replacement for Goodreads. It is, I love this app. Hashtag not sponsored in any way, shape, or form, although if you want to, we'll talk. But Storygraph is a great independent app. It's really designed for readers to keep track of your reading, to be much more visual in how you do so, and like I can look at how my moods are. Well, that's not gonna. Hold on. Let me turn off the green screen. That might help. So, like, you can see how the mood reads, or, like, how what is this one? Oh, that's the pacing, and, you know, what type of page number, you know, you're reading, or what kind of platform, or authors, or all of this kind of stuff. And you can keep it very visual, but it also allows you to, with a URL search, to kind of, like, build your TBR, and then go from there, kind of thing. So I have my list on here. So there's a bunch of different books that we could go with. And I guess our question is, I want something to be a break from the less than anti-hero murder happiness of the Red Rising series. I don't know that we need to go full you know, full 180 degrees. So but at the same time I want to kind of do something different and interesting. So there are a bunch of different authors that are here, and I'm gonna put up a poll for 3 that I think that I want to read, that are just gonna be a little bit different, a little bit more just different, that will be something not quite so, not morally gray, but not, I need a character I can root for a little bit more than Darrow. Like, you kind of root for Darrow, but at the same time, Darrow is very, there are no good guys in that series. Like, there are no good guys whatsoever. So we're going to start, I'm going to give 3 options, and then I'm going to put the poll up. So I'm going to give an explanation of the 3 options first, and then then we'll pick based on which of those 3 options we think is most interesting, and what we think would be different or fun to read kind of things. Actually, I'll give you 4, because I've got 4 here that I'm really intrigued by at the moment. And I think 2 of them count, I guess, as YA. But we'll look at that. And okay, so first up is A Marvelous Light. It's the first book in a 4-book series. I think it's 4 books. Double checking. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. The 4th book was just released. Yeah. So there are 4 books in the series. So A Marvelous Light. Set in an alternative Edwardian England, this comedy of manners, manor houses, and hedge mages, including a magic-infused murder mystery and a delightfully queer romance. For fans of Georgette Heyer or Julia Quinn's Bridgerton, who'd like to welcome magic into their lives. Young Baronet Robin Blythe thought he was taking up a minor governmental post. However, he's actually been appointed a parliamentary liaison to a secret magical society. If it weren't for this administrative error, he'd never have discovered the incredible magic underlying his world. Cursed by mysterious attackers and plagued by visions, Robin becomes determined to drag answers from his missing predecessor. But he'll need the help of Edwin Corsi, his hostile magic society counterpart. Unwillingly thrown together, Robin and Edwin will discover a plot that threatens every magician in the British Isles. I have read the first... I have seen this book, and it's really interesting. It's got 3.97 stars, basically 4 stars. Oh, Rick Riordan wrote a review of this. When Rick Riordan writes a review of something, I just need to know what the reviewer says. Whether or not I'm going to agree with him is an entirely separate issue, but Rick Riordan is an author that I have a lot of respect for. I really enjoy his writing. I have a lot of respect for him as an academic. So I'll just be intrigued. It's never fair to describe a book in elevator pitch terms comparing it to other well-known stories. It's like X meets Y with a touch of Z. That said, a helpful shorthand aesthetic for A Marvelous Light might be Downton Abbey with magic and gay romance. Yes. Yes, please. In Edwardian-era England, circa 1908, part of the English upper classes are secretly magicians with their powers tied to their land and to their family lineage. Oh, I'm gonna read this. There is even a liaison office in the government to handle and contain flare-ups of magic and keep news of magical doings from the eyes of the general public. In the midst of this are 2 protagonists, Robin and Edwin, one unmagical and the other barely magical, find themselves thrust into a life-or-death hunt for an ancient magical document that could change the world. And while running for their lives, the 2 men also go from antagonists to unwilling allies to, could it possibly be romance? I enjoyed the pacing and the world building. The frenemies to lovers theme is always one I enjoy. Be advised, once things heat up about halfway through, they get quite steamy, like R-rated steamy at least. But I'm sure that will not be a disincentive to many adult readers. Thank you, Rick Riordan! That is a helpful review. This is a helpful review to readers. It tells me a little bit about the plot. It gives me information about what the reader enjoyed about this book. It also gave me things about, like, hey, this is not a bromance. This is a romance. Okay, so Marvelous Light is a definite option. Switching gears. Option number 2 is The Foxwife. A young woman is found frozen in the snow. Her death is clouded by rumors of foxes involved, which are believed to lure people by transforming themselves into beautiful women and men. Bao, a detective with a reputation for snuffing out the truth, is hired to uncover the dead woman's identity. Since childhood, Bao has been intrigued by the fox gods, yet they've remained tantalizingly out of reach. Until now, perhaps. Meanwhile, a family that owns a famous Chinese medicine shop can cure ailments, but not the curse that afflicts them. Their eldest sons die before their 24th birthdays. Now, the only grandson of the family is 23. When a mysterious woman enters the household, their luck seems to change. Or does it? Is this new servant a simple young woman from the north, or a fox spirit bent on her own revenge? So, very interesting. Sent in Manchuria in 1908. So, just before the revolution that will depose the emperor. But set in Manchuria. Very intriguing. People are enjoying it. I'm not going to look at reviews yet. So this is an option. I love a good... So Coldrake, the nine-tailed fox is specifically a Japanese and Korean kind of imagery. In China, fox spirits aren't necessarily tailed the same way, but fox spirits can be similar to the concept of the nine-tailed fox. There is a multi-tailed fox in Chinese mythology, but it's not kind of like specifically 9. And fox spirits can be both tricksters and moral redemption. It's very intriguing. And like, there's this whole Confucian ideology of the nine-tailed fox that I really, really enjoy, and how it kind of ends up. But this is an interesting story I've been following and want to read. So switching over to a still Chinese inspired, but more of a kind of, I guess, young adult fantasy, is Strike the Zither by Joan He. The year is 414 of the Jin dynasty, and chaos abounds. A puppet empress is on the throne. The realm has fractured into 3 fractions, and 3 warlordesses, intriguing, hoping to claim the continent for themselves. But Zephyr knows it's no contest. Orphaned at a young age, Zephyr took control of her fate by becoming the best strategist of the land and serving under Jin Ren, a warlordess whose loyalty to the Empress is double-edged. While Ren's honor draws Zephyr to her cause, it also jeopardizes their survival in a war where one must betray or be betrayed. When Zephyr is forced to infiltrate an enemy camp to keep Ren's followers from being slaughtered, she encounters the enigmatic Crow, an opposing strategist who is finally her match. But there are more enemies than one, and not all of them are human. So this is inspired by the Three Kingdoms. That's what I thought. It read like it was inspired by the Three Kingdoms, in which case I was going to be very, very excited, because I'm a big Okay, so for those of you who don't know, I'm a big fan of Chinese dramas. I'm also a big fan of, like, classic Chinese literature. I've read the Three Kingdoms series books. I've read the Marsh Raiders as well, and the third one, which is the red. What is the red one? Anyways, it'll come to me. I'm a big fan of how they're reinterpreted and readdressed, and looked at through a variety of lenses through the out Chinese history and then even into modern day. So I think this is going to be interesting. It's 3.76 stars. Again, I don't really care about star ratings. A lot of people seem to like it. Some people don't like it. But I don't really... Star ratings are very subjective, and I acknowledge that. But I also acknowledge that a lot of people need those star ratings because a lot of publishers look at the star ratings, and a lot of publishers look at the star ratings, particularly on Goodreads, to determine whether or not authors should get another book deal. But I also think that this is just a pretty book. This is just a pretty cover. Like, this is just pretty. We like this. So that's a distinct option. I also like the fact that these characters aren't great warriors, they're strategists, right? Like, the combat of the mind is where this you know, they have to compete against each other. And then the last option for the community read-along is What the River Knows, which is written by Isabella Ibanez, and was really, really popular. Was a nominee for the Young Adult was nominated for the Good Choice Award, Goodreads Choice Awards. It's been nominated for a bunch of awards from Barnes & Noble and a bunch of other things. It's been on the Barnes & Noble Young Adult Book Club read, I believe, a couple months ago. Bolivian Argentine Inés Oliveira belongs to the glittering upper society of 19th century Buenos Aires. And like the rest of the world, the town is steeped in old world magic that's been largely left behind or forgotten. Inez has everything a girl might want, except for the one thing she yearns the most for, her globe-trotting parents, who frequently leave her behind. When she receives word of their tragic deaths, Inez inherits their massive fortune and a mysterious guardian, an archaeologist in partnership with his Egyptian brother-in-law. Yearning for answers, Inez sails to Cairo, bringing her sketch pads and an ancient golden ring her father sent to her for safekeeping before he died. But upon her arrival, the old world magic tethered to the ring pulls her down a path where she soon discovers there's more to her parents' disappearance than what her guardian led her to believe. With her guardian's infuriatingly handsome assistant thwarting her at every turn, Inez must rely on ancient magic to uncover the truth about her parents' disappearance, or risk becoming a pawn in the larger game that will kill her. The Mummy meets Death on the Nile in this lush, immersive historical fantasy set in Egypt, filled with adventure, a rivals to lovers romance, and a dangerous race. I wish that people would that this enemies to lovers or rivals to lovers was better structured and not, everybody's go-to comparison, because 9 times out of 10 it isn't actually rivals to lovers, or it isn't even actually enemies to lovers. But this is very intriguing, right? Like, this is very much everything I kind of really enjoy. You've got a lot of Goldrake shakes fists to the heavens. Darn you, infuriatingly handsome assistants. Exactly. So, I think we've got Marvelous Light is 397. What the River Knows is 397. After 30,000 ratings, wow. Strike the Zither is 3.76 after 3,000 ratings. Foxwife is 4.05 after 4,000 ratings. The lowest amount of ratings is Strike the Zither. The highest amount of ratings is A Marvelous Light. So that tells us something. But Marvelous Light is 377 pages. What the River Knows is 404. Strike the Zither is 368. And Foxwife is 390. So it's all going to be about the same length of book. I think it's very intriguing. A lot of them are very different. There's a nice kind of wide range, although they all kind of are historical fantasy. Intriguing. So I'm going to put up a poll right now, and for the next community read, and we've got What the River Knows, Strike the Zither, A Marvelous Light, and intriguing, and The Foxwife. And I'm going to put this up for 10 minutes. And so we're going to vote on what the next community read will be, along with the Charlemagne Pursuit for the Cotton Malone series. I'm probably going to pick one of whatever the number 2 book is to just choose to read this week, or actually I'll see which one is more easily available at my library and grab that as to read this week, because I need more books to read. Did I mention I need more books to read? But while that's going, I have some thoughts, and this is where I'm going to transition into away from book discussion and review of books that I've read personally in this moment, and transition into what a couple things I've been seeing recently on the internet, because the internet is an interesting place. I noticed recently that there's a large push in the younglings on the internet. Hi, I've been here since the beginning. Do not quote the old magic at me, which I was there when it was born. And I've seen a rise, particularly recently, when I was scrolling through Instagram, as one does, and noticed that for some reason, because my Instagram algorithm gets messed up all the time, that, how to phrase this, the discussion about fanfiction had been gaining. With the rise of fantasy romance, with the rise of a lot of romance in general being discussed on Book Talk or Bookstagram, there has been a rise in discussion of fanfiction. Fine. I support this. I read a lot of fanfiction. Yes, hi. Was there. I remember. I was there. But, hello, younglings. And this rise of a particular fanfiction work called Manacled has gotten very popular. It is a Draco Hermione post-war Harry Lost Handmaid's Tale fusion romance fanfiction, right? Like, okay, you do you. I do not judge people who enjoy this fanfic. I think you can enjoy whatever kind of fanfic you wanted. Coldrake. I will neither confirm nor deny. If you want to read this, fine. If this is something you enjoy, good for you. I was not my personal taste. I'm not a big fan of that particular subgenre or anything. Like, the plot was not for me. Okay. But this rise in this popularity has led to a rise in bound copies of fanfiction being sold. Hi, y'all, that's illegal. Please do not sell bound copies of fanfic on Etsy, on Amazon, on anything. It is illegal. You can't do that. And if you can't bind it yourself and make it look fancy in a hardcover with, leather or whatever, because you don't have those skills set, do what the rest of us did and just print it out and put it in a binder and make the binder cover really pretty. But don't do that. Do not sell that. It is illegal. And the doing of illegal things this way is how we get people reporting platforms like Etsy, AO3, fanfic.net, or, some of us remember, LiveJournal, and end up with these things called purges. Please do not do this. It is illegal. Just be like the rest of us, print it out, put it in a 3-ring binder, and move on with your life. That's all you have to do. Print it out and move on. Do not put fanfic and rate it on Goodreads. It's not a book. You can't do this. Please stop. We were there for the purges. We remember when LiveJournal started purging all of the fan fiction because certain people claimed that it was inherently harmful. We remember fanfic.net purging anything that was not PG and or het. We remember why AO3 came into existence to begin with. It is an archive of our own, right? Like, it is based on the concept that fanfic writers and fanfic readers should be protected and have a safe space to post whatever they want to post and not be looked at weird for whatever kink they want to talk about, or whatever pairing they want to talk about, or whatever fandom they want to talk about, right? Like, this is just straight up things that have come from the past. Do not cause the destruction of these platforms, of these safe spaces, because you can't recognize the basic law involved. There's a reason why old fanfic writers, and in fact most of us who still remember to do this, put a giant disclaimer at the beginning of their fics that just says, "Hi, anything you recognize does not belong to me." It's so that they didn't get taken down by authors. It's so that they didn't have the various authors such as, well, not Anne Rice, but I'm more likely, after having a lot of things came out, more likely to believe it was Anne Rice's team rather than her specifically, because I don't think she understood what was going on, who went after fanfic writers. I remember when various other authors would go after fanfic writers and get sites taken down, and get fics taken down, and get entire platforms taken down. And you're like, please stop. Do not ruin it for all of the rest of us, because you can't bother to look at the rules and understand you can't do this. You are not special. Some of us may still have printed copies of their various favorite works because we remember the purges and waking up the next morning and going, oh shit, this whole author was deleted, or everything in this category was deleted, or everything in this tag was deleted. And as Coldrake says, and now that Disney owns a shit ton, they will come after you legally. Like, Disney is really good about walking that line about when it needs to enforce their trademarks and their copyrights, and when they're willing to let the community be. Do not force the great and all-powerful mouse that sees all and knows all to come for us. We will bitch the fuck out at you because we know it's your fault. And it is from that we turn around and go, okay, look at what you're doing. You want to read fanfic? Great. You want to read this fanfic about Draco Hermione Handmaid's Tale post-war bullshit? Go right ahead. You want to write that dark romance? You do you. You want to rate it? Don't rate it on Goodreads. Rate it on AO3. Leave kudos. Leave reviews. Comments. That's all you have to do, right? Like, recommend it to your friends. Great. But you don't need to do not treat fanfiction as if it is a book, or do not treat fanfiction sites as if they are social media platforms where your engagement will drive your popularity, because that's not how fanfiction archives work. Fanfiction archives are archives. Give you a summary, tag appropriately, and let your work stand on its own. Mind-blowing, I know. Alright, so we have an answer. We have a vote. The poll is done. And the answer is, the community read book will be A Marvelous Light by Freya Marske, M-A-R-S-K-E. And I'll, again, tag it. I'll link it all in the description when this goes up on YouTube, and have all of that go up there. But I'm looking forward to reading this with everybody, so we'll read this for the month of April. And I will probably look at a couple of these other, probably either What the River Knows or Strike the Zither, whichever one my local library has, as will be one of the books that I will read for this week. And I'm going to take this week as to have what I'm going to call a library week, right? Like, I'm just going to walk into my library and see what interests me. I have my, my Storygraph TBR, my list of books that I want to read. It's quite long. There are 40 books on it. But this is just books that have intrigued me because I've come across them or I heard about them or something else. But these aren't necessarily books that have passed my first page test, right? Like, these books are still subject to the first page test. And for those of you who don't know or are new here, my first page test is if I pick up a book and read the first page and it makes me want to turn the page to continue reading, then I will read that book. If I do not want to turn that page, then I'm going to not read the book. So this will be I've got a bunch here. I've got a list that I'm going to go through. A lot of fantasy, some cozy fantasy, some interesting publications. And I'm just going to see what my library has. And of this list that I've gotten reading. And then pick up a couple of them from the library and read from that. And also see if there's anything else in my library itself that intrigues me. Because sometimes you just walk into the library, and that's one of the things I love about a really good library. Your local library, whatever, is you also get things, you get new releases, of course, but you also get things that are in the back catalog. And that was one of the things I loved when I was younger, and I still love today, is finding books that are out of print otherwise that your library has, right? Like, your local bookstore may not have some of these older works in the bookstore because they're out of print from the publisher, but your local library might still have a copy and might have more than one copy, and be like, oh, well, this is something I wouldn't necessarily have found just walking into a bookstore, unless it was a secondhand bookstore, which is also a lot of fun to read at. But I will find by walking into my library and seeing what my library has to offer. So that's that. I am going to, again, say, we'll let you know. I'll post on the community tab on YouTube and various other posting what my actual reading list for this week will be. A Marvelous Light will be our community read, which we'll read for the last Saturday of the month of April. I am really looking forward to this. I think we're going to have a lot of fun. I'm really enjoying. I didn't get as much reading done, or at least as many book reading done as I wanted to last month in March. Part of that was that I was sick a little bit more, and there was just a lot going on. But I think I'm going to have more time to read myself. Yeah, Lopez, I do agree. A lot of public libraries are kind of having to clean out shelves because people are objecting to books, or they're just not able to keep books, or the books are too old and too damaged, so they can't keep them, which is sad, but I think I wish more people would enjoy them. I'm going to encourage more people to read more books. But I'm going to, again, post what I I'll post like maybe a Twitter thread, and then on the YouTube community page, a list of like what I actually pick up. I think I'm going to go to the library tomorrow. Yeah, actually, I have to go to the library tomorrow. Ooh, I have a book overdue. Have to go to the library tomorrow. Look, it was one. I forgot. It was 24 hours. I'll pay it. I'll pay the fine. It'll be fine. I might even give them extra money because it is the library. It happens. Yep. So that, I think, wraps up our book discussion for the day, for this Saturday. Tomorrow we are back with Mass Effect: The Gathering Dark. We are on Omega. There is a shootout. There is a fight going on. The Blood Pact are the Blood Pact. I'm sure this will be fine. That's why you have your medic, everybody. Trust your medics. But come join us for that, 8 p.m. Eastern, right here on the channel. Pope will be in the driver's seat, and I get to play play in that game. Your friendly neighborhood trail doctor. You can then find me on Monday over on Wandering DM for I believe we're back. We're either back with the start of the next season for Montreal by Night, or they're doing the Montreal by Night interlude. One of those two things is happening, and I will find out, but Montreal by Night will be on Monday. And even if I am not on screen on Monday, I will be in chat, and we'll be there over on Wandering DM, chatting with everybody if you come join us. And then be back here next Saturday for more book discussions, because books are fun, and books are good for you. But if you missed out on anything and you want to catch up on the Mass Effect series, all of that is up on YouTube. If you want to support the channel, there's a number of ways to do that. You can support the Ko-Fi that I have. All of that goes back into the production, into the hardware, into the software of running this channel. There is also a merch line that all of that proceeds go back again into the running of the channel, into the support of the channel, all of those good things. And I look forward to seeing everybody next time. But we should see if there's anybody to raid out there. Cybernation Uncensored is up. They are playing some death in space. I'm sure this will be fine. We're gonna go raid them and send them some love because they're good peoples. We appreciate them. And until next time, everybody, have yourself a good night.